The next person that I want to introduce to you is a guy called David Rosenberg. Now, David is our first keynote conversation here at evokeAG. It's proudly supported and sponsored by the Department of Primary Industry and Regional Development. And also, AeroFarms is a company which is building large-scale commercial vertical farms in urban centers. In fact, they have the largest vertical farm in the world. I was reading some stories on this the other day, and Dubai is going also heavily into this space. So watch this space now, and it'll be very exciting to see what David's view on this future. And this is all about vertical thinking, how it's redefining how we live in urban areas, and what food production zones will look like in the future. And also, it's about repurposing the buildings, the infrastructure that we have in these urban areas. Please welcome, all the way from the United States, the only country in the world where they think WWE is real and the moon landing is fake, all the way from the United States of America, co-founder and CEO of US-based AeroFarm, David Rosenberg.
First, hats off to evokeAG. That was a beautiful way to start off the morning with that music and this surrounding. And I hope it inspires us all as an industry that needs to innovate faster. This is an exciting time for the industry where there's a tremendous amount of innovation happening in a very fast amount of time. And to illustrate this, I just want to quickly share my story, which I think is somewhat indicative of where the industry can go. This is my fourth change the world company I've been involved in, from fintech to internet infrastructure to nanotech and now to agriculture. I'm a kid from New York City where the closest thing to ag was the Bronx Botanical Gardens. And here, getting involved in agriculture first because of appreciation of the macro tensions that our world needs to solve. That said, of the four companies that I've been involved in, two of them leading, this is by far the hardest. And it's because of one thing, and that is biology. So here, like those of us who have kids know, you have two kids in the same environment, and they grow up very different. And here, not that dissimilarly, plants, while we try and systematize growing plants and innovating in agriculture as much as possible, you do the same thing, and it's not always obvious why a plant behaves one way or the other way. So how fast we could understand what the plant is telling us and respond to it, the more successfully we're going to be. But it's very hard versus other forms of manufacturing where you just churn out widgets. You do the same thing again and again, and you know what the outcome's going to be. In agriculture and biology, it is much harder. Again, the hardest industry I've been involved in. The catalyst here, in my experience, in over 20 years innovating, in my experience, there's often a new technology that could catalyze one's industry. Here, for me, it was a diode, light-emitting diodes. And I read something called Heitz's law, similar to Moore's law, where more people have talked about the computing power improving by doubling in computing power every 2 years. Heitz's law talks about the efficiency of a diode improving by 50% every 3 years. And I realized just following Heitz's law, as LEDs become more efficient and more cost-effective, it could catalyze different industries, and one of the industries is farming. So here, plants don't need sunlight, they need spectrum. Spectrum at different intensities, at different frequencies, and appreciating as this cost curve goes down that the economics associated with indoor farming is going to improve. My co-founder started that path in 2009. I started it in 2011, appreciating that more and more crops, the economics are going to improve. And then the other necessary feature for me in building AeroFarms and figuring out where I wanted to innovate was the concept of cradle to cradle. Cradle to cradle is a philosophy that became a product certification that talks about the right nutrients and the right application. most simply breaking up the world into the biological sphere and the technological sphere, and from a design standpoint, encouraging that we design for disassembly, so the right materials in the right application, and essentially do more with less, and appreciating, again, the macro tensions that we face as humanity. How do we constantly do more with less? And that's something we're trying to always do at AeroFarms, whether it's grow a plant with less water, with less energy, keeping more product in the food system as opposed to spoils. This is a video that just gives an illustration of what we do at AeroFarms.
Who would have thought you could grow a plant in a warehouse instead of a field? Without sun, without soil. We're doing it, and we're not only doing it on an experimental level, we're doing it on a commercial level. Today we focus on leafy greens. We believe we could grow anything. Our vision is to build farms in cities all over the world to allow everyone to have access to fresh, great-tasting, healthy food all year round. The fact that we could grow plants using 95% less water, 0 pesticides, as much as 390 times the productivity per square foot as a field farmer, shows what technology can do. We're able to understand the plants better than anyone ever in the history of farming, and it's by the data. And this is why the relationship with Dell Technologies is so valuable. We are collecting all of these data points of what we're giving the plant. What spectrum of light, what nutrients, how do we improve quality, taste, texture? We're using data analytics and becoming better farmers. At the end of the day, it's about how do we deliver a better product to the customer.
This is AeroFarms baby kale. This is going to be packed the flavor of kale. The watercress had those peppery notes. The bok choy is super juicy. This is what I love about AeroFarms, is that it's like technology that's allowing people to farm better and smarter, and it makes really delicious food.
The world needs a new paradigm of how we're going to feed this planet. AeroFarms is illustrative of what technology can do to provide more with less.
So here, this was inspired by, again, these macro tensions, whether it's population growth, also appreciation that to feed our planet, we need to constantly lower our cost of goods sold to provide food, and that often is industrial ag, which is great for producing a lot of food, but it's often clumsy and leads to over-fertilizing, over-pesticizing of our fields that leads to challenges. Doesn't need to, but it's often the case. So the world's lost through chemicals coming into our soils, through taking nutrients from our farmland, a third of its arable land in the last 40 years. So that, again, there are a lot of challenges going on. Some of it's policy related. In the US, often there's policies where if you don't use your water, you can lose your water. So there's often over watering our lands. And here we need to address problems holistically from very different vantage points. So droughts and Salinas, where in the US a lot of leafy greens are grown, Salinas, San Joaquin, there's been big droughts, and then there's a lot of spoilage in the food system. In leafy greens alone, it's about 60% of what comes off the farm gets spoiled, so there's a lot of waste. And here, on its fundamental level, when I started this business model of AeroFarms, I looked at it as disintermediating the supply chain, going from field farming, building the farms in cities to enable local food production at scale. Now I realize there's other benefits to vertical farming in collaboration with other partners and developing other technologies. Here are some of the other macro tensions from what I understand in Australia. Here in Melbourne, the cost of agriculture is rising faster, farm values, than residential values. So here it's pushing some of the farmers further out. some of the other challenges in agriculture is inconsistency, year-round availability, pesticide, residue, land degradation, food waste, lack of freshness, price volatility, severe weather, shipping costs, water usage. Here, from an innovation standpoint, there's a lot of money coming into the industry that realizes, as an industry, the ag and the food industry isn't going away, so how do we invest in innovators that are solving problems? So again, back to this is a great time to innovate in this industry. And from a local food production, or from a farming production standpoint, by no means do we think vertical farming is where all crops are going to be grown. Not at all. In fact, we've only gotten the economics right for leafy greens, and we've been doing this since my co-founder since 2004. We have other farms. So our last farm, which is leafy greens, it's our 9th farm. It's about the size of this building. And we've grown about 300 different varieties of leafy greens. At Aero Farms in total, we've grown about 700 different varieties of plants. And we have farms that are growing very different types of crops. And the innovation cycles are tough. It's probably about 4 years from trying to grow a very different crop to commercializing it. I was talking to someone backstage about robotics and automation and pollination, automation and soft touch robotics. Like, how do you constantly lower capital cost, operating costs, and get the quality right? As our head of R&D always reminds me, plants are like a balloon. You squeeze it in one area and it pops up the other areas. So how do you constantly improve yields, but at the same time maintain quality is challenging. So in different geographies, it might be appropriate to grow in greenhouses, in the field, and some crops in some geographies in vertical farms. And what's important is to do the right thing in the right place. More and more, I think vertical farms are going to have its place just because of Heitz's law and that lowering cost curve of diodes. Questions we ask is fresh relevant? Is consistency relevant? Is there price volatility? Or if we could change a quality of a plant, is that of benefit? And also, is pesticide free of benefit? And if the answers are there, then often there's a solution for us. We also realized that we want to go big to get the costs down to a place where we're competitive with the field. The automation is key, especially in a place like Australia, to lower the labor component. And the automation's in processing. And once one puts in automation, one wants to utilize it 24/7. You don't want to put in automation and have that utilized a few hours a day. So the growing scales in a linear way, unlike the processing. So we need big growing to utilize the automation. And we have automation in seeding, harvesting, cleaning, and packaging. But that was an important realization. We also realized that to be good farmers, we really need to combine data analytics as well as a technology company. So we have engineers that look at, well, we'll start off with plant scientists. We have plant scientists, physiologists, plant pathologists, molecular biologists that are looking at developing a specification for a plant. What does a plant want? And then they work with the engineering team how to deliver that specification. So here, imagine a specification, just take temperatures. We want a plant that's grown between 70 and 73 degrees. Here, you could solve that environmentally just by changing a thermostat. You could solve it mechanically by changing a direction of an air fan. You could solve it biologically, changing the temperature of the water at the root structure. You could solve that problem genetically by just getting different genetics that maybe you want between 68 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So one has to bring a lot of different people in to solve that problem. Otherwise, we're either over-solving or under-solving that problem. And here, so the plant scientists work with mechanical engineers, structural, lighting, electrical, PLC process, industrial, design engineers. Constantly, how do you reduce capital cost, operating costs to get this, to deliver the specification that the plant wants? And then it's the data analytics. So I showed a video that was we put together by Dell. We're working with a lot of tech companies, Dell just one of them, on how do we digitally control the farm as well as take data from the farm that ultimately makes us better farmers. So there's big standards. What we try and do at Aero Farms is constantly raise the level of performance. We have brilliant people. What I'm most proud of is the people at AeroFarms. And in terms of the industry, we have like about 1,500 resumes a month of people that want to work at AeroFarms. And I'm sure it's the same with other ag tech companies. It's, again, a great place to innovate in this space. And they're very mission-driven people that constantly hold us to higher standards, see what we could do more with less. I look at the business in terms of being successful, not just bringing expertise on the mechanical side and the biological side, but also on the operational side. And it's bringing in a lot of CPG-related people. Our head of operations was the head of operations at Dannon. Our head of production was the head of production at Pernod Ricard. Our head of engineering was the head of engineering at ConAgra. But people from the food space, a common theme that we see of what works is people from CPG and food that constantly have that mindset of how do you reduce capital cost, operating cost, and get a fast throughput to work. And then a lot in the data analytics as discussed. The automation I mentioned is key, and as we grow more products, here, if one defines success as being competitive in the field, the labor component is key, and here the robotics and automation is something we're heavily focused on. It's applying automation and robotics to different plants is some of the challenges we see. And very much we don't want to solve all problems internally. We partner a lot with players in the ag space as well as players in other fields. One of the exciting elements is the integration of machine vision and machine learning. So how we could image a plant and take information, and here we get really close to the plant as opposed to like from a satellite, but we could understand the chlorophyll and how the reactions are with light, what intensity, what frequency, how it optimizes plant growth, as well as curvature, width, height, petiole length, ratios of that, stem length, color, discoloration, curvature. It's all information, and how do we take that information and again change our algorithm, our understanding, and react sooner to biology as plants sometimes respond or don't respond. We also want to bring back heirloom varieties. So I mentioned we've grown about 700 different varieties of plants, but introduce people to new varieties. Going to some of the supermarkets here in Australia, I was surprised, while they're great farmers here in Australia, there isn't that much variety in leafy greens. And I think part of the challenges as well is marketing and sales as well as operations. So do the customers want different varieties of plants? How will they respond? Also, will customers want product that might be pesticide-free? Is that a concept people would appreciate? If the economics require a slight premium, like a 20% premium, how will that fit into the market? So these are some of the questions we ask as we go to new markets. We don't just try different varieties, but just to illustrate some of the innovation, different plants are grown in different varieties. So in leafy greens, we grow in a cloth material that's made out of 100% recycled material, and it's 100% reusable. We'll also use different growth medias in different types of crops. So we've tried about 150 different growth medias to date. And all of these, you can imagine the innovation cycles. There's only so much you could compress it. And often, one of my biggest surprises was building a small farm the size of this stage is very different than the problems one needs to solve building a farm the size of this room or the farm the size of this building. And here, these non-obvious elements of challenges with scale also challenge the innovation cycles, because once you build certain farms, there's certain legacy stuff that you just have to deal with. It's hard to just swap out technology as one realizes there might be a better way to design. We're somewhat vertically integrated. We also have a retail brand. And again, trying to communicate our message to customers. I'm always curious as to how the customer responds about how we grow. I'm happy so far that has not been an issue, or customers. There was a big romaine recall in the US, and customers like Whole Foods, ShopRite actually asked us to tell that story more on the front of the package than the back of the package. And we always look at where we could support the UN sustainability goals. And here, these are specific associations with several of them. And what we, again, look at mostly is how our people just push us constantly to do more with less. There's a lot of press in this industry in general, not just with aerofarms. And again, back to it's an exciting time in the industry to innovate. And it's not just LEDs, whether it's CRISPR. There are lots of different catalysts that could bring a whole lot of innovation across the whole industry. Robotics, machine vision, machine learning. And finally, I just want to leave you with the kids. Here, one of my proudest accomplishments that I was involved with here at AeroFarms is we build these farms on the other side of the tracks, if you will. And we've hired, in our last farm, we have about 20 past offenders. It means people that were in prison. In the US, recidivism is a big problem where people go back, they come out of prison, and then they have a hard time assimilating back into society, and they go back. So we've hired a bunch of these people to work in our farms, and their kids, where their kids go to school, they don't eat leafy greens. Kids in a lower social economic demographic don't eat greens. And here, to the comment of defining success differently, here we put a farm in a school. This school in particular, Michelle Obama visited when she was First Lady. One of her big initiatives was childhood nutrition. And we changed behavior, got the kids to eat the greens instead of the fries, just by having more access to the crops. They were involved in the seeding, harvesting, cleaning. Anyway, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.